Are you worried that Brexit will have really fundamentally shaken people's trust in the whole democratic process in the UK?
Well, to be honest, I think it's been a long time coming in towns like mine. I think before we had the vote to leave the EU, we had a very sudden and dramatic rise in support for UKIP, including amongst many people who would never have dreamed of voting for openly racist or far-right parties. And before that, we had years of falling turnout that we thought was apathy, but actually was a level of frustration, even anger with the political system, that people didn't feel really spoke for them or understood their interests. And so I think this has been a long time coming, and Brexit really was the sort of final chance to get us to wake up and listen. My worry about the way that the debate has gone in Parliament and in politics over the last few years, especially the last few months, is that with attitudes hardening in Parliament as well as public, a number of my constituents now feel that not only are they being told that they voted the wrong way last time, but they're also being told that they are essentially too stupid to have a say in the future of the country. And, the view from here couldn't be more different. There are people who voted Remain and Leave, having thought very hard about it, because they had feelings about the European Union and about the way that politics works that just simply aren't being addressed, and we're still not addressing them. And I think we are facing a very real breach of trust between politicians and many people who voted in good faith and feel that we're just not taking that seriously.
It's interesting that you were saying that MPs' positions are hardening as well on both sides of the debate. I mean, this coming week, of course, MPs will be voting again on Brexit options. Nobody got a majority last time round. I mean, are you worried that rather than kind of reaching out for a compromise, MPs are actually becoming more entrenched in their own positions?
I think MPs are very like the public, actually, and part of the reason that Parliament's gridlocked is because the public is still gridlocked. There are very different views about what should happen next. But actually, most people, just like most MPs, I think, are willing to compromise, understand that this was a very close vote, and that although we're leaving, that doesn't mean that we're leaving in the hardest way possible. I stood on a manifesto that said we should leave with a deal in 2017, and that was largely accepted by people in Wigan and many other similar constituencies. The trouble is that what we've had is the same as the public. We've had people on each extreme. On our side, people who support a second referendum because they want to remain. On their side, people who want to leave with no deal, who've been knocking out all of the compromise options in the middle. And as a consequence, we've got to this point where we can't move forwards. Now, last week, you saw a bit of movement on that. We started to compromise, and the option that came closest, because many of us did compromise, to winning a majority support in Parliament was a customs union. And I hope what you're going to see emerge tomorrow and over the next few days is strong support across the Tory and Labour benches for a form of soft Brexit. And then it's really up to the Prime Minister. Is she willing to start listening to those very different views and those very different experiences across the country? Or is she going to drive this country to the brink of no deal? Or is she going to face a general election?
So you've been listening to what you're saying there on the customs union, and also listening to what Emily Thornberry was saying earlier about a customs union. Why is it that you're unable to vote for the withdrawal agreement, which effectively has a customs union in it anyway? If you're trying to find a way through and a compromise solution, why not vote for the Prime Minister's withdrawal agreement?
Well, going into a transition where you're still able to trade is obviously extremely important, and the withdrawal agreement passing would allow us to do that. It's why for 6 months now I've been saying I'm trying to find a way to vote for this. The problem is the lack of clarity about the future, which is why this week is really important, because if we can persuade the Prime Minister to write those assurances into the political declaration that accompanies the withdrawal agreement, and given that on Friday they accepted an amendment from Gareth Snell and myself and others giving a role for Parliament in those future stages and a vote on what happens next, then perhaps you could start to see some movement. I have to say, though, the Prime Minister has caused some problems this week, because by saying she'll stand down when the withdrawal agreement goes through, which was designed to reassure hardline Tory MPs on her own side, she's actually had precisely the opposite effect on the Labour side, because these guarantees that she's currently making, we have no idea whether they'll be met by a new Prime Minister. A new Prime Minister obviously wouldn't be bound by many of those assurances, and that has been the problem all the way through this process. The Prime Minister is trying to play it both ways, but actually she's going to have to decide. Does she tilt to the centre and form a majority consensus across Parliament and the country around a form of soft Brexit and enable us to move on, or is she going to continue pandering to a small group of people in her own party? That's her choice, only she can make it, and that's what I hope, you know, we'll be able to deal with this week, because, you know, for all of the talk from the Prime Minister about the need to compromise, there is one person who hasn't compromised all the way through this process, and that's why we're in the mess that we're in. And the frustration that you heard in Whitstable is absolutely what I've been hearing in Wigan as well, and we can't take much more of this.
So just to really try and pin you down there, you mentioned the amendment that you've been pushing, giving parliamentarians a greater say on any deal, the next phase of talks. So if that amendment goes through, would you then be prepared to vote for the withdrawal agreement?
So the government said on Friday that they will accept that amendment. We weren't able to move it because the Speaker didn't select it. It's just a technical question. The government has said that they will write that into the meaningful vote whenever it materialises again, if it does. So that was a really, really welcome move from the Prime Minister. Very late, but still very, very welcome. Well, if we could get this consensus around a customs union written into the political declaration, if we could see a Prime Minister really start to move and accept that these things matter, and give some level of assurances around the process, around what happens next, then yes. But the problem was on Friday, she stood at the dispatch box lecturing MPs and still saying, you know, the reason this hasn't moved is you. And actually what we need to see from her is a completely different approach that understands and respects that towns like Wigan have very different economic situations than even perhaps Emily's constituency, and all of those different parts have to be heard in what comes next. If she can do that, she would start to rebuild trust, and people like me would find it much easier to vote through the withdrawal agreement and move this country on to those next stages of negotiations.
Emily Thornberry told me a few moments ago that in her heart she wants to remain. What do you want in your heart?
Well, I've always been clear with my constituents. I've never lied to them about it. I campaigned for Remain. I still think it would be in Britain's interest to remain in the European Union. But I do think we're at a moment now where we have only bad options in front of us, frankly. Every option that we have has downsides. Why? Because we had a referendum. We asked people to vote in good faith. And as you heard in Whitstable, as I heard at the football yesterday in Wigan, we are breaking our democracy. If we ask people to come forward and express a view about the future of the country, and they take it seriously and they participate in what was the biggest democratic engagement exercise in my lifetime, and then we say actually we'd like to try and overturn the result of that before we've even tried to implement it, I think the consequences of that will be very, very severe for decades to come. And that's why we've got to find a way to come together and work through the middle of this to see if we can find an economic relationship with the EU going forwards after we leave that protects jobs in towns like mine, but also respects the fact that people came out and expressed a view. We told them that they would be heard, and they should be.